Simio is proud to announce their latest software release. This video will guide you through all the new and exciting features and enhancements that has been introduced to Simio since the last major release. Trace Enhancement. There is a new trace type selection under the Advanced Options in the Run Setup group of the Run tab of the Facility Tools ribbon category. Trace Everything is the default. The selection is saved per model. Install option, 64-bit shortcut. We have added an install shortcut option to start Simio 64-bit instead of 32-bit. UI responsiveness. There is a new minimum number of UI updates per second entry in the Advanced Animation dialog. It's defaulted to 5 and provides much better UI responsiveness for otherwise unresponsive models. Gantt views, search and target details. Gantt views now have a small search box at the top that does basic searching. If a user types or pastes a desired string in the search, Simio will go to the first row in the grid that contains that text. It also does partial matches. In this example, searching for 21 matched a row containing that string, while searching for 101 finds the row for order _101. Also within the Planning tab, if a user double-clicks on an order entity within the Target Detail tab, the user is taken to the same order within the Entity Workflow Gantt. Link Enhancement. Change the starting-ending node of an existing link. We now provide the much-requested feature of changing the starting or ending node of an existing link without losing the link or any vertices. Right-clicking on an existing link will allow the user to change starting node or change ending node. When one of these is selected, the user has the ability to choose another node by clicking on it, at which point the link will disconnect from the original node and reconnect to the selected node. Multi-selective links also allows these two options. New table function, TableName.KeyColumn.RowForKey, key value. We've added a new table function, TableName.KeyColumn.RowForKey, key value, that returns the row index of the row for which the specified key column has the specified key value, or 0 if no row is found. It's important to note that this function respects master detail relationships and only looks at the detail row subset for a given master row selection and returns the row index as related to that subset, not the overall index. Thus, the user could have a table, resources as below with the resource name as the key column. The following expression, resources, resource name.rowForKey, weld1, would return the value 8. The function could alternatively be used to access other information within the resources table for a given key value. Resources, resource name.rowForKey, weld1, object type would return shed server. The key value may also be an expression that holds the information, such as an entity object state. Model entity.whichWorkstation. Previously, the search step could be used to access the row information. This new function method is faster than using search step to access the same information, especially with large data table searches. New path decorator, roller. We have added a new roller type path decorator that can be used with any of the links in Simio, including conveyors and paths. Adding and deleting nodes from links. We have added the much requested feature of being able to add or delete one or more nodes from an existing link. As you can see from the below diagram, there is an existing path link between output at source 1 and input at sync 1. By clicking on the path, the user is directed to the Edit menu, which will allow for the addition, insert of any type of node to the path. Alternatively, if the path has one or more existing nodes that are no longer required, the user may right-click on the node, as in Basic Node 1 below, and select Remove Node and Join Links. Then select the path that will remain as the current link, e.g. Path 1 below. Secondary Resources Enhancements. We have enhanced the secondary resources functionality within the server, combiner, and separator in the standard library and filler and emptier in flow library. These enhancements allow for more flexibility in specifying either single or multiple secondary resources for processing or before-after processing. These enhancements include having multiple secondary resources for processing, resources used throughout the entire processing of an entity, to be specified using a repeat group data structure. If using a repeat group to specify secondary resources for processing, we also provide off-shift rule, must simultaneously seize, immediately try seize, and immediately try allocate when release property values to be specified. If not using a repeat group to specify secondary resources for processing, allow number of objects, units per object, and must simultaneously seize property values to be specified for the single resource requirement. For each secondary resources, other resource seizes repeat group, we now include a resource efficiency property for a resource seize requirement inside repeatable property. See the above release notes on new efficiency features. For each secondary resources, other resource seizes repeat group, we have added an immediately try seize property value to be specified. Similarly, for each secondary resources, other resource releases repeat group, we now include an immediately try allocate when released property value to be specified. These features were added to Simio for the main resource and task resources several sprints ago. If using a smallest value or largest value selection goal is used to seize a secondary resource, we now display a value expression, like selection expression, in the properties window. New run.freezePeriod function, RPS users. We have made the run.freezePeriod function now visible to RPS users. This function has been used in the scheduling batch beverage production example. For more information, see the freeze period section of the documentation for the model and refer to the on-run initialized freeze schedule process logic. Entity animation enhancements. We have added the ability to specify an optional direction, X, Y, Z, and role for orientation of entities on queue animations. This was a user-requested feature. This orientation takes precedence over any other given orientation for the queue. For example, the direction specified by an oriented point queue. Additionally, there are some new functions in the orientation namespace for objects. Orientation.direction.x returns the x component of the unit vector indicating the current direction the object is facing. Orientation.direction.y returns the y component of the unit vector indicating the current direction the object is facing. Orientation.direction.z returns the z component of the unit vector indicating the current direction the object is facing. Orientation.roll returns the current roll angle in degrees, measured clockwise from the plus y in the object in the xy plane. Materials, review period, and replenishment policy if not location-based inventory. If the location-based inventory of a material element is set to false, we now allow review period and replenishment policy related properties to be specified for the single global inventory of that material. This information used to only be specified with the inventory element for the material. This was a user-requested feature from our Simio Sync users meeting. TableBased Schedules. Change starting type for repeating table-based schedules. Users can now give an alternate starting type anchor point for a repeating table schedule. By default, it starts the schedule from the start of the run. Now users can alternatively tell it to start from some offset from midnight on the first Sunday before the run. If a repeating schedule is raw numbers for offsets instead of date times in terms of week-long repeating intervals, this mode is probably more appropriate. This is an enhancement to the recently added repeating schedules. RPS enhancement. Compare plans without running risk analysis. We now allow the user to compare plans without running risk analysis, simply using Create Plan button. The Save for Comparing button is now available after using the Create Plan to generate the deterministic plan. This saves a copy of the model in the baseline folder in the navigation window. After a run was saved for comparing, changes can be made to model properties and/or data tables and Create Plan button used to run new plan. Under Results, Target Detail Report, select the Show Differences button to show the status change between the plans. Routing Group Element Enhancement. The routing group element has been enhanced to provide a new on-starting route request queue search add-on process trigger. This was added to provide greater flexibility to the routing group as well as eliminate unnecessary process execution. Example scenario. You have 20 entities waiting in the routing group's route request queue, and there are 4 available destination nodes. To assign entities to the 4 available nodes, you'd see the on-starting route request queue search process get executed 4 times, once per each search pass through the queue, and the on-evaluating route request process get executed 190 times, 20 times 4 times during first search pass, plus 19 times 3 times during second search pass, plus 18 times 2 times during third search pass, plus 17 times during fourth search pass. TableBased Schedules Enhancement. In Sprint 193, we added a start type property to allow users to specify an offset starting time for table-based schedules. We've now enhanced this property with an option for specific date time, where the start date time property is then specified, as shown below. Release Step Enhancement. Skip Release If property. The release step now provides a skip release if property, similar in functionality to the C-step skip sees if property. It allows for an optional condition that indicates whether to completely skip that particular release requirement, i.e., simply ignore the repeat group row. The release step's release condition property has been renamed to selection condition to be consistent with the C-step and to help lessen any possible confusion that might have arisen between having release condition and skip release if properties. Secondary Resources Enhancement. New skip requirement if property. In the server, combiner, separator, filler, and emptier for either secondary resources for processing requirements or task resource requirements, a new skip requirement if expression property is now provided. This feature allows for an optional condition that indicates whether to completely skip a resource requirement, both the seize and release steps. For example, a user may have a modeling situation where a worker is only required sometimes for a particular task, thus needing the ability to filter out resource requirements on a requirement-by-requirement basis without having to define different tasks. For example, suppose the object name property for a resource requirement is specified as modelEntity.WorkerReference, where workerReference is a state variable on the entity that is set to nothing if no worker is actually required. You would specify the skip requirement if conditional expression for that resource requirement as modelEntity.WorkerReference equals nothing. Decision processes. Allow breakpoints. Simio now will break on a breakpoint in a decision process as long as you have the Use Scheduled Breakpoint setting in File Settings set to false, which is the default. Some of the decision processes within Simio include on-evaluating move request, on-evaluating rider at pickup, on-evaluating rider reservation, and on-evaluating seize request. Secondary Resources Enhancement. New skip seize if and skip release if properties. For completeness, we have added skip seize if and skip release if advanced options to the secondary resources, other resource seizes, other resource releases repeat groups. These properties allow users to optionally skip the seize or release requirement. TableBased Schedules Enhancement. In Sprint 193, we added a start type property to allow users to specify an offset starting time for table-based schedules. Then, in Sprint 194, we enhanced the start type property with an option for specific date time, where the schedule's start date time property is then specified. Now, in Sprint 195, we've included a new offset calculation type property when using the start type of specific date time. This can be set at default, relative, or absolute, and determines how the schedule's start date time relates to the start date time and end date time values. New scheduling examples. We've added 2 new examples to the Simio installation. Please note these examples are meant to show specific concepts and include basic object animations. We will follow up within the next sprint or two with more detailed documentation. They include scheduling labor efficiencies. This example is like the scheduling discrete part production example in that it uses various tables to generate the objects within the facility window. There are 5 employees, worker objects, that use different work schedules, as defined in table-based repeating work schedules. The new resource efficiency properties are specified within labor table, based on which resource is being used. The task sequences within the servers indicate the worker list, resource efficiency, and selection rule based on largest efficiency. The model also uses the switch resources if possible off-shift rule for workers. Scheduling parallel route controller. This example is a modification of the scheduling discrete part production example. It is intended to show an option for easily modeling parallel routing steps. The routings table has been modified to include parallel production steps within the routings of finished good A and finished good B. A route controller server object and its reference process titled populate immediate successor sequences are used to generate entities for the various parallel process steps. For example, in the below routing, the sequence number is used in the process logic to determine the parallel activities within the routing, cut and weld, 10.1 and 10.2. Operations are done in parallel before finish, 20, and then ship, 40. The entity workflow Gantt shown below shows the resources in sequence for the order as they are processed. New SimBits. We have added 3 SimBits to our extensive list of small models that illustrate specific concepts. They include server blocking approaches. This project includes 4 models that demonstrate various ways of modeling blocking, that is, holding an entity at a server or processing area until there is room at the next server or processing area. The methods used include connectors, add-on processes with wait step and built-in events, and entity destination types of selecting from a list/custom routing group element. InventoryReplenish. This project includes 3 models that demonstrate some of the inventory replenish policy options in Simio. This includes the min-max, order up to, and reorder point, reorder quantity rules. Both the review period options, including timer review period and continuous review period, are shown in each of the models. This project includes 4 models that demonstrate the use of secondary resources for processing. The models increase in complexity and demonstrate methods for selecting resources based on attributes like cost, efficiency, and skill.
Thank you for choosing Simio. To view the full release notes, please visit the Release Notes section under our Resources tab on Simio.com.